Dear colleagues, we have our new presenter, Professor Boyd Johnson from the United States, and I'm giving a virtual floor to Professor Johnson, please.
Hello, and I should say good afternoon or good evening in Ukraine. I am Boyd Johnson, and I am Professor of Organizational Leadership at Indiana Wesleyan University in Indiana. And the focus of my own research that I've been carrying out for some time is on differences in leadership styles and different attitudes toward research on the whole area of leadership and organizational behavior. Through that, I have come to become involved in online teaching for about the last 10 years and have taught quite a few courses online as well as on site, and also in a blended format, which is using both methods, which I'll talk about here in just a little while. So today I'd like to talk about information communication technologies in adult education, which is a very large and growing area in the United States and indeed around the world. Because although there are many young people who want to get a university education, there are also many adults who are working who realize that they need to have more education, and so this opens up possibilities for them, as we'll discuss. The second slide tells a little about myself, my background in international studies, anthropology. I'm interested in the social sciences, and my research interests, as I mentioned, are in global leadership and cross-cultural issues as it relates to leadership, as well as I've published in the areas of global business and also intercultural education. Our third slide, which is entitled 2010 Sloan Foundation Report, is a summary of the fact that the Sloan Foundation, which is a large organization that is a nonprofit that sponsors research, particularly in the sciences, has published information about online learning in the United States. And the statistics from a few years ago are that there are millions, at that time 5.5 million students were taking online courses, but that was several years ago. Now it's doubled since then. And the question that we have before us is, how has technology interacted with the desire for higher education in the United States? And so what we see is that this is a growing area. If we go to the next slide on the latest statistics, and this, of course, just goes up to 2011, but you can see, if you look at the, particularly at the annual growth rates here, just percentages, you can see although there's been a moderate or modest growth in the numbers of students in universities in a traditional model, that is attending classes and attending university as a full-time student. The number of online students has far outpaced the number that have a more traditional approach to education. So this tells us that the face, as it were, of education in America, and indeed I think around the world, is changing dramatically. We see that that universities in particular are going to have to respond to this desire on the part of students for education that is more convenient and more accessible and more flexible. Those are the criteria that students are looking for, and universities are responding to in some cases. Some universities are not responding. An interesting fact, at least here in the Midwest in America, is that although one would think that the large public universities, state universities they're called, would be the most responsive to the changes. They're, in actual fact, the least responsive. They are still expecting students to come and sit in a classroom at a defined time on a defined day and take notes and interact in person with a professor. That model is still continuing, but the number of students who want to take online courses for a number of reasons that we'll get into, they are not responding to. And so it's the private universities that are tending, in America at least, to respond to this desire on the part of students. They're doing this because there's tremendous competition for students in America, although most private universities are non-profit. That is, they're not trying to make money, but they do need money to survive. They have to pay their faculty and, of course, pay for their facilities, etc. So while they don't pay taxes, they still have high needs for income. And there's over 4,000 institutions of higher learning in the United States currently. And the number that are offering online courses is growing, as we'll see. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that the number of chief academic officers that are reporting online education as critical to their institution's long-term strategy is going up considerably as well. From these data here, we'll see that within the last 10 years, the number of institutions where the top academic officers see it online as part of a major part of their strategic plan has really taken off and is now over 70%. And that is something that is also growing as well. At my own university, we have whole departments that at one time only offered on-site, that is in the classroom education in the university, and now are offering, because of the demand, they're offering almost totally online, including, interestingly enough, our nursing program, because quite a lot of nursing can be taught in an online format, the anatomy and issues like that. So we have at our own university a tremendous growth, and the interesting feature is the response of the faculty. Some faculty are very resistant to teaching online. They feel that there's a drop in quality, and others feel that they're uncomfortable with the technology. They want to be connected in a human way. And yet, as we're connected now, there are ways to, I feel, to communicate online that are very effective. That is going to be, I believe, the future of higher education. And because I saw that coming, I became heavily involved in online, although I still continue to teach, as I mentioned, on site as well. But the fact is that faculty are realizing that as the whole university is changing, they need to change too. We have many faculty who are resistant, as I said, who feel that they like the face-to-face contact with their students. And this is understandable. There is an energy in the classroom that you just can't get without face-to-face. There's a back and forth in the environment of communication that is very important as well. However, a turning point for me is when I was beginning to teach online, and I asked a professor who was doing that, well, what makes you think that the students are engaged? That means really involved in the material and are actually actively participating in their education in the online. And he said, well, what makes you think they're engaged in the classroom? And that made me really think, because often students are sitting there on their cell phones, texting, or on their computers doing other things. And so just because they're physically in the class doesn't mean that they're necessarily involved. And in fact, what we're finding through the research is that when students are able to get onto the class in an asynchronistic fashion, that means whenever it's convenient for them to participate in the classroom discussions. Remember, this is not live, but is at a time that's convenient for them. They can interact with other students. And the research is showing that they put more time and more thought into their postings, that is, their involvement with the classroom discussion, in writing in their answers to questions and responding to what other students have written. So whereas in the classroom you may have students just whatever comes into their head, they'll share that. In an online forum, it's called, they tend to be much more involved and engaged because they know that what they put on the computer is going to stay there. So let's move on to the next slide entitled Why? Why this change in online? The fact is, in the United States, and I believe this is happening around the world, as I was mentioning, you have more adult students who are professionals who realize that they need to keep their current job while they're gaining more education. Education is becoming increasingly important and required, actually, by more and more U.S. companies. Because of that, in addition to the economic downturn that we had recently, well, in 2008, 2009, we're seeing that there's an increased demand for education, but people can't leave their jobs to go full-time to education, so they want to take it part-time, or they want to take it online at the same time that they're working. So they would get on in the evenings or weekends or times like that. According to the Sloan report, again, in 2010, there's also the issue of higher fuel prices, people not wanting to travel, and so to be able to work from their home to get their education or from a convenient site is very attractive. And so in serving working adults, the American university system is tapping into a huge market that was not really accessible before. The statistics are showing that the average age of the American university student is going up. It's now past 27 years of age and rising. And so there's a great interest on the part of the universities because of the competition that I mentioned for students to add more students from this population group. This would be younger adults in their 20s and 30s primarily, but even older who want to get more education for professional reasons, as I was mentioning. And so in addition to the institutions that offer programs to serve working adults, we see that adult learning programs are becoming very, very popular for short-term programs as well, for certifications and various training that is required as well. And so because of a decrease in good jobs, there is an encouragement to seek, as I mentioned, more education on the part of American working adults. And of course, universities are very keen to offer programs for them, but they need to be aware that the students want convenience. As I mentioned, they want flexibility. They want to be able to do it on their own time and in their own schedule. And this makes for a very interesting environment. Well, let's go on to look now at the implementation. This is the next slide on how does this work. The growth of online programs or platforms, they're called, that allow universities to put courses in an online format is really growing. There are several. The most popular is Blackboard, but there are other programs such as Angel and Moodle and many others that are available for a price. They're not free. In fact, in many cases, they're quite expensive. And how it works is the university contracts with the organization that offers the platform. They, depending on how many courses they want to offer, they do it by the number of courses. They will sign a contract and have to pay the company that provides the platform because it's copyrighted. The platform then allows each course to be loaded, it's called, onto the in an online format, where the students will see each week a different workshop. And in that workshop, there are all the announcements about the course. There are the assignments all outlined. And then there are what are called forums, as I was mentioning. These are the areas where students can type in their answers to questions or interact with the professor or other students in an asynchronistic way. There are platforms that allow live synchronistic interaction as well, but those are not as common because they tend to be less popular. What students will also have is a place to submit their assignments. They'll submit papers, so rather than submit them in paper, a physical copy, they'll transmit it electronically, and the professor will download those. And of course, the professor can print them out if he or she wants, or can just grade them online electronically and then return them to the students electronically as well. So the students have a place where they can see all their work, all their graded work. They can see the dialogue with other students on the subjects for that week. And they also can ask questions in a public forum, or they can send private messages to the professor if they are not clear on some of the material. So it is a very rich environment for interaction. As I said, the students will often spend more time thinking about the material and having a more careful response to the questions than I have seen in the classroom in a live situation, where students are watching the clock and just want to get out and often miss the class, and then they've missed all the material, and then they want you as the professor to share the material with them or let them make it up, and it's very inconvenient. Whereas with online, they can go in on the day or days that are convenient for them, the time that's convenient, and they can give the responses at any pace they want. They can start to type and then think about it for a while and type some more. And what's interesting is that the professor can see the time that the students post their answers or their papers, and often it's in the middle of the night. Some people like to do it late, some are very early, and so it all depends on the students. I myself have had students who have been in different states. A class can have students from all different states in the United States or even other countries. An interesting side note is how many members of the United States military are taking degree courses, because it's paid for by the U.S. military. And I once had a student who wrote me that he was going to be late with his paper because, and I've seen all these, I thought I had seen every excuse that there is in my years of teaching. But he said that he was a soldier in Afghanistan, which I knew he was, in the U.S. Army, and he had to go out on a mission, and they were trapped by the Taliban and couldn't get back in time for him to do his paper. So I thought, well, that's an excuse I've never seen before. They were ambushed by the Taliban, and therefore he was late with his paper, so I allowed him to do that. So you have students in all different environments, all interacting with each other, and therefore you have a very rich environment in the sense that the students can benefit from being with students from other areas, both geographically, professionally, and in terms of their background, their ages. I've had students in their 60s in classes with students who are, in their 20s. And normally in the usual university environment, you wouldn't have that. You would have students that are very much like each other, homogeneity, it's called, of the group, whereas you have a heterogeneous population in the online environment, which I personally feel, from my experience, leads to a very rich and fruitful environment of discussion and experience that the students can bring to the class. So as we can see from the slide, this environment allows professors and administrators to track attendance. It's very easy to see whether somebody has attended. Of course, that means that they've been involved in the discussions or have posted their papers, they've submitted their assignments, how much time they've been spending and their progress, and whether they have been involved in the class, in the online discussion boards and group work. They can also take quizzes. Again, those are at their convenience in terms of the time. There are ways with online to manage quizzes very easily where the time is set and the students will be kicked off if they go too long. The platform will also grade the quizzes for the professor, which is quite helpful. And that leads to a more convenient environment for the professor of the class. So almost any subject can be taught in this way. Clearly, there are some subjects that are hands-on, that is, where they need to be in a laboratory, like chemistry or something like that. And so even those, though, can be presented in a mixed format or a blended format, which we'll talk about in just a little while. So the implementation has been really improved over the last 10 years. The very first online programs were for teaching in this method were pretty basic, and they needed to be improved. And I've seen quite a lot of advancement over the last decade. The students really like this for obvious reasons, because of the convenience, as I was mentioning, and also because they can benefit from accessibility to the professor. What they can do is send you a message in the class, as I said, or they can write you an email or have other contact with you through Skype or other means. And so it appears that students are more engaged with the classes, and the research is showing that this is true. If we go on to the next slide on how does an online university work, this is an elaboration of what I was just explaining, that the teaching is asynchronistic with the help of online platforms such as Blackboard. Again, that's the most common and popular, although there's a lot of competition in this area, and Blackboard is having to really improve their product. They were the largest and had a bit of a monopoly, we call it, on the programs up until the last few years. An interesting side note is that a number of textbook publishers are now getting into this business, because they realize that not only are they going to go out of business because students are not buying physical textbooks as much as well, because the textbooks are being offered in an e-textbook format, an e-book format, in other words, where it can be read on your smartphone or on your computer. or your iPad or any other method like that. That's becoming very popular now for students, and therefore the publishers are responding, and they're actually getting into the online platform business. One of the largest publishers, called Pearson, in the United States, is now offering. In fact, my university is going to now move from Blackboard to Pearson, and they have their own platform, which is similar to Blackboard but has unique elements. So, as we saw, there are elements of teaching for thematic discussions. The homework can be submitted this way, and tests can be taken, and individual work as well. And there can be more interaction that can be set up, of course, so that there can be a face-to-face, particularly through electronic means, or, as I said, Skype, or by phone. The real revolution, you can almost say, also that's occurred, that is in parallel with the changes that I've been mentioning, is the growth in online libraries and databases. And our students use, in addition to e-textbooks, they, if they want, they can still use physical textbooks, but almost all their research in the library is now done electronically, because all of the journals, books, etc., that are available in the library are now available in electronic form. Particularly the journal articles are available in this format. And what that means is that the students can go to our university library virtually, again, from anywhere in the world, from Afghanistan, from Europe. We've had students from Asia, and they can access articles that have been assigned or do research from their computer and not have to be in a physical library. This has revolutionized research, and particularly in my area, I teach at the doctoral level and doctoral dissertations. It's opened up a huge area of databases that were never available before, because if the university didn't have that database, then the student couldn't access it, or they'd have to drive to another university to use their facilities. And now the availability is just incredible. Thousands and thousands of journals, dissertations are available now. All the dissertations that are done in the United States and master's theses are now put online, so students can access those as well. They don't have to go to the library and pull them off the shelf as you used to. They can access those dissertations and journals and other books electronically. So this has really changed things, and students are able to do this at their own convenience in a way that allows them to really focus on the material and pick a time that's best for them. The research is showing that, as I mentioned, that students are much more engaged and much more involved in their online programs in general. There are students, of course, who are late with their assignments. You have the same problems in online teaching that you have in live teaching, with lazy students and late students and all that. But in general, they seem to be more involved, and this works well for the class. If we go on to the next slide, we'll see that ICT is an incredibly important part of this, because information communication, obviously, all that I've been talking about couldn't be done without these technologies in place. What has happened is, whereas it used to be that only computers could be used to access the platforms, the online programs and courses that I've been discussing, now it's very clear that students are wanting to have access through smartphones, touchpads, and other means. And so that's creating what is commonly referred to as a mobile campus. You have a situation where students really don't have to be together although they can interact with each other electronically, as I mentioned. And of course, most young people are very, very comfortable with this form of communication. That seems to be the way that they communicate with each other, even sometimes in the same room. I've seen that happen. So when you have access like that, where you literally can have your course on your smartphone, the implications are very powerful. The implications for education are very powerful. You have a situation where students have access to, as I was mentioning, to an entire university database situation with journals, thousands of journals, dissertations, books, etc., available on their smartphone. It's just that would have been unthinkable, 5, 6, 7 years ago, or not to say 10 years ago when this was all starting. Many people thought it was remarkable that you could even do this on a computer, and now it's being done from everywhere. Students will be doing their work while they're taking a ride on a bus or a train, or they can have access in a coffee shop, as I said, at their home, or almost in any place where Wi-Fi is available. And so the fact is that it also takes away not only the restriction of distance, that I was mentioning, that students can be from all over, but also it takes away the restriction of time. Those are the two big limits to education before, time and distance. And now with students being able to stop, come back to the class, to post and think about it, to read what others say, to go find a source that can supplement. Often our assignments require a student to, whatever they post, they have to back it up, any statements of fact, with a citation. So they have to find a source. Many assignments require them to do that, whereas in a classroom, you would rarely, if ever, ask a student, well, what's your citation for what you just said? So now you have an opportunity for students to realize that they've got to be more scholarly. They've got to find a source that can back up what they say. They can't just say things off the top of their head. And so it can be interrupted or stopped. If they have an urgent family situation, they can attend to it and then come back. And they can also interact with others, discuss it, the topic, and then benefit from that discussion, either live discussion with other students or friends or others, and also interact in the platform to see in the discussion forums what other students have posted. The next slide is talking about, again, this issue of accessibility, which is a key word in the whole area of online education. And so the fact that it fits into people's schedules is, as I mentioned, is very, very important. However, there are limitations, I should say. There are weekly deadlines. Often the students will have to post, that is, make their contribution to an online environment by a certain day of the week, by the 4th day of the 3rd day of the 5th day. And so there's an organization that is done by weeks. And so you may have a 5-week course, an 8-week course, or a 14-week course, depending on the school and the program. But within that, it's the week tends to be the defining limit, where the assignments have to be in by the end of that week. They do have, as I mentioned, incredible accessibility to the professor, to other students, and it forms what's called a presence, which is an interesting effect that is somewhat new, that the students feel that the class in some ways is always open. And this is brand new because, of course, in the traditional format, excuse me, the class is only open during the class times, so, Tuesday and Thursday at 11 o'clock, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or whatever. The fact is that, in a way, the online class is always open, and students, as I said, can come in at 2 in the morning. I've seen postings all night. I've seen postings early morning, weekends. It doesn't matter. And so it creates a interesting dynamic that the student can go in any time and feel that they're engaged, that they're actually in the class, even though there may be nobody else at that time, posting. They are engaged in the material. And as we mentioned, the numbers of ways that the class can be accessed is just exploding. And so mobile learning is becoming the next evolution from e-learning, electronic learning. And so after the student downloads the course, they can use it at any time, as we have seen. Well, let's talk just here for a moment then about our own program at Indiana Wesleyan University. That's IW, just as one example of what we're talking about. What you're seeing on this slide that is entitled IWMA program, this is our master's program in organizational leadership. And in a moment we'll talk about the doctoral program. This is an example of a new phenomenon that just occurred over the last few years, which is called blended learning, also called hybrid method. And what that simply means is that there are programs where the directors of the program feel, as in this case, that the best way to have the program made available is through a blended format, which includes both an on-site component as well as an online component. And so in this case, for example, the master's program, this is a screenshot of what the student sees when they come in. Their courses will be listed on the right. They'll just click on their course and up it comes. In there is a schedule, and there are, in some programs like this one, a requirement to show up, but not every week. Usually it's just 2 or 3 weeks within a class, depending on the length of the class, of course. In this way, you get the best of both worlds, as we say. You have the benefit of the on-site energy and the face-to-face, the interaction, the ability to put students in small groups and work together face-to-face. And at the same time, they can also do their other weeks online and have the benefits that I've already mentioned earlier in my presentation. And so increasingly we're seeing that many students like this option. They like the ability to be with other students, but not have to be with them every week. Many have said to me that's just too inconvenient to be required to be in a classroom every week. But they like the fact that they can be together with other students at least semi-regularly. And so the program is devised, as I was mentioning, for working adults primarily. So they tend to be a bit older. They tend to be very, very busy. They have not only work responsibilities, but obviously they have family responsibilities. Many of them are married, have children, or they have community responsibilities. They have involvement in their communities in some way. So the fact is that this fits into their schedule very well. Obviously, it does restrict, though, remember back to the issue of time and distance, it does restrict the numbers of students that can come into the class. Although some students, I just taught one last Saturday, are willing to drive an hour or more to come to the class. Some will drive up to 2 hours, some even more, for the opportunity to have a blended class with their co students in the class. So the fact is that at Indiana Wesleyan, we, in this program, as in many of our programs, we offer both options. You can either take the program online 100%, or you can take it in a blended format. And again, it's up to the student which one they want. I will say, though, that in our master's program, we were growing modestly in the blended program, but as soon as we offered the program totally online, we got many more applications, many more students, and so we're opening up more and more totally online classes because of the convenience that I was mentioning. So students will go in, click on their class at any time, and participate. The other program that I head up is the DOL, that's the Doctorate in Organizational Leadership at Indiana Wesleyan, and this is a program that also is blended. Now, in this program, the students don't have a choice to do totally online. We might eventually offer it totally online to open it up to a global audience, but at this point, we have students who are coming in for the on-site classes. But what's interesting is that they're coming in, we have students from 18 states, and some of them even fly in for the on-site classes, but they take the rest online. Now, in addition, we also have them do their coursework, as I mentioned, online and on-site. They also are assigned an advisor for their dissertation, and they do a lot of their work electronically, again, through emails and Skype and other communication. Excuse me. And so that is proving to be a very effective method. We actually have courses that are 11 weeks. And yes.
5 minutes. Sorry.
Thank you.
5 minutes.
I'm just finishing up. So the online component is very effective with doctoral students. They really understand, and they understand how to get the work done in a very rapid way. You might be interested to know that we also bring some of our doctoral students over to Ukraine to examine leadership. This is a doctoral program in organizational leadership, to come over and to meet with Ukrainian leaders in business and education and healthcare to understand the unique challenges of leadership in the Ukraine. And that's a whole nother presentation, which I won't get into. Here's a picture of some of us. There I am on the right, with some of the students and the group that we met with in Kyiv 2 years ago. So that's a topic for another day, but we do have options to travel internationally as well. And so in conclusion, I just want to say that information communication technologies help to educate and train adults. With the availability now of this incredible technology and new learning techniques, and a blended format is one way that this is taking place. Again, there's a great interest in online totally, but also blended as well. And so the impact, I think, is almost impossible to imagine what will happen in the future. Okay, well, let's go on to the last slide. It's just questions, and I'll open it up for questions now. And I welcome any interaction we can have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for interesting presentation. Actually, it's quite impressive. Me and my colleague were quite happy with that, and we could see a lot of people were connecting to our website online, watching it. By now, I do not see questions through the website, just because I was forced a little bit to ask you to quickly finish. However, your presentation is available at our website on a special page, and people who would like to ask you a question, they may access this page and leave questions for you at the page of our website. So in principle, if you will be so kind a little bit later just to visit that page, probably you will find there are questions and waiting for your answer.
I'll be very happy to do that. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.